Hey y'all, it's Miss Solomon here, and in this video series on Dante's Inferno and contemporary thought, we're exploring some ways that the epic poem can continue to inspire conversation today. The first video here focuses on Canto I, marking the beginning of Dante the Pilgrim's descent into hell, but first in the dark wood of error. Dante the poet sets the stage with Dante the Pilgrim at the midpoint of his life, around 35 years old. Read with me on page 922 or the slide. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in the dark wood. This beginning, of course, is literal in its characterization, but it's more allegorical, which is a trademark of medieval literature. First, Dante the poet says, our life's journey, not my or his life's journey. With this specific pronoun choice, Dante the Pilgrim can be viewed as kind of an everyman figure, making his personal crisis universal, one that we will all walk in our own way in our lives. The dark wood he finds himself in symbolizes sin, confusion, and spiritual disorientation, essentially a loss of direction in the moral and intellectual senses. Throughout this video series, I will provide some ways that Dante's Inferno overlaps, supports, or inspires more thought and conversation within other realms of study. So first, how does this opening inspire philosophic discourse? The dark wood represents existential bewilderment, the human tendency to lose the path of virtue and reason. It also invites reflection on Aristotle's idea of telos, or purpose, and St. Augustine's concept of wandering away from divine truth. Second, how does this opening overlap with the discipline of psychology? The forest itself can be viewed as the unconscious of sorts. So it's like this shadow territory of the mind where moral certainty dissolves. Carl Jung, or Jungian critics, often read this as the beginning of individuation, the descent into the self that precedes transformation. And then lastly, how does this opening mesh with religious doctrine or conversation? The lost path is sin and the inability of the intellect alone to reach salvation without divine grace. It recalls the Augustinian idea that the soul cannot find its way back without help from God. Moving on to the plot, next in Canto I, Dante the Pilgrim encounters three beasts that drive him back into the forest. Each, in medieval fashion, has an allegorical meaning for the entire epic poem. So they're serving kind of like as their own allegorical representations, and they're going to serve kind of like an extended metaphor throughout the epic poem. So interpretations vary, but the leopard can be seen as a symbol for lust, deceit, or incountenance. And so incountenance means kind of a lack of restraint. The lion symbolizes pride, ambition, or violent appetite. That's appropriate. And then lastly, the she-wolf represents avarice or extreme materialism, greed, and spiritual hunger that devours without satisfaction. Each beast represents a distortion of love, a central anchor in Dante's moral order. Love, when rightly ordered, leads to God. Whenever disordered, it leads to sin, in Dante's view. The three beasts also represent the three main landscapes of Dante's hell, but in reverse order. So the she-wolf, though representative of seemingly lesser sins, mirrors the first terrain of hell because she signifies the sins that are the hardest to first overcome because they are generally sins of the flesh. They're very psychological. The lion represents the second part, where shocking sins like murder live, also appropriate, while the leopard is designated for the realm in which all the great treacherers live, including Satan himself. This scene, where Dante stumbles upon the beasts, could inspire numerous discussions. So, first is philosophy. The beasts dramatize Aristotle's tripartite division of the soul. Okay. And that's a classic view of the soul that I think that you would really find interesting if you delved into it a little bit further. Each beast symbolizes an overpowering appetite that defeats reason's guidance. In psychology, the beasts can be seen as projections of the psyche's fragmented self, if using Carl Jung's model of the psyche. So you have the uncontrolled desire, which is the leopard, the egoic dominance, which is the lion, and then the insatiable emptiness, which is the she-wolf. They externalize Dante's internal chaos. And then in religious discourse, each beast could correspond to a class of sin, later punished in hell. So you have incontinence, violence, and then fraud. So Canto I thus foreshadows the entire moral architecture of the Inferno. Back to the plot. After Dante the Pilgrim's encounter with the three beasts, Virgil appears as this embodiment of classical reason, poetry, and wisdom. Virgil was the great epic poet of Italy and serves as both a poetic and visionary guide for Dante, the poet in real life, but then Dante the pilgrim on his journey through Pandemonium. Virgil tells Dante that he cannot overcome the she-wolf by his own strength. He must follow another path, the journey through hell and purgatory toward divine enlightenment. On page 925, starting at line 89, with Virgil speaking, we read this. So this is Virgil. We must go by another way. Who would escape this wilderness? For that mad beast that fleers before you there suffers no man to pass. She tracks down all, kills all, and knows the glut or the gluttony. But feeding, she grows hungrier than she was. She mates with any beast, and she will mate with more before the greyhound comes to hunt her down. He will not feed on lands nor loot, but honor and love and wisdom will make straight this way. So, in other words, Virgil's description of the she-wolf allegorizes our bodily sins more directly linked to our carnal or animalistic natures. If you'd like to explore this idea further in either philosophic, psychological, or religious means, feel free to chew on the following a bit more. So, for philosophy, Virgil represents the limits of human rationality. It can diagnose moral order and lead to self-knowledge, but not to salvation, according to Dante and medieval Christianity. This dramatizes the transition from philosophical ethics, like the wisdom of antiquity and a lot of these spheres that we have spent a lot of the semester in, to Christian revelation. Next, overlapping with psychology, Virgil is the ego's rational guide confronting the chaos of the unconscious. His presence marks the beginning of integration. This is where intellect illuminates moral confusion, in a sense. And then lastly, in religion, Virgil kind of prefigures grace. He comes before Christianity, before the crucifixion. So, though a pagan, Virgil becomes a providential agent. His role shows that even non-Christian wisdom participates in God's larger redemptive order. While no literal punishments occur in Canto I, the principle of contrapasso, or the fittingness of punishment to sin, is symbolically introduced. Dante the Pilgrim's lostness mirrors the sinner's future states. Each circle of hell will externalize an inner moral condition. So, first, the dark wood signifies hell's disorientation. It's the absence of divine light and direction. The hill of salvation, which Dante sees beyond but cannot reach, foreshadows the hope of redemption he must earn through descent. And then the beasts themselves serve as contrapasso figures. Each one embodies the distortion that leads to its corresponding circle's punishment. And this will all make a whole lot more sense through the video series once we're able to get some more concrete examples of the contrapassos. While our descent through hell naturally presupposes damnation, Canto I is more about the preparation for wisdom. Dante the Pilgrim must recognize that enlightenment demands confrontation with his own moral failures. Canto I dramatizes three core philosophical truths. So the first one is that knowledge begins in disorientation. Like Socrates from ancient Greece, Dante the Pilgrim starts from the admission of not knowing the way. And that's the first step. The second philosophical truth we can draw from Canto I is that reason alone cannot save. Human intellect, symbolized by Virgil, can illuminate, but only faith or his love for Beatrice can redeem. And then third is that transformation requires descent. One must go through darkness, both psychological and spiritual, to reach renewal. Before we close, I do want to make sure that we have some key images to take away, especially for my visual learners and for those folks that want to pick up on these recurring themes, topics, and the building of the extended metaphors throughout the epic poem Inferno. So the first key image I hope that we take away is the path. It represents moral and intellectual direction. The lost path equals sin and confusion. All right. The second one is the light and shadow. The shifting light symbolizes revelation and obscurity. Dante's movement from shadow into light is moral as well as metaphysical. And then lastly is the hill. It's an archetype of descent toward divine vision. Remember, it's out there. You can see it, but you can't reach it yet. It's unattainable at first, though it will reappear as the mountain of purgatory and throughout parts of the Divine Comedy on the whole that we don't get to read necessarily, but we know that it's out there, and I would encourage you to read Beyond the Inferno once we are finished. So thank you for thinking through Canto I with me, and I hope to see you in the next video to explore Canto II. See you later.